Hi, I'm Brad Smart, and the title of this Top Grading Tips article is Maintain Control in a Top Grading Interview. Just about every book on how to get a job says that interviewers are so bad at interviewing, which happens to be generally true, that to get a job offer, interviewees must take control of the interview to tell interviewers how good they are. And the books advise candidates to prepare self-promoting sound bites. Those books advise that, just like a politician on TV, candidates should answer the questions they want asked, which will not necessarily be the ones interviewers like you ask. Fortunately, most candidates preparing for a top grading interview will go to www.topgrading.com, learn about the chronological interview, read that they'll be able to talk about all their successes, and see that a final step in hiring is for them to arrange reference calls with their former bosses. Well, sharp candidates realize that if they try to take control and avoid answering questions, they won't get a job offer. Having said that, even A-player candidates have some failures, they've committed some mistakes, and they prefer not to talk about these and instinctively try to manipulate their interviewers and take control, at least for a few minutes. So, there are three key ways to take back control if the interviewee either tries to take over or just wanders off on topics not of interest to you. Number one, the first time, just be gentle, but interrupt and restate your question. That usually works. Number two, the next time, interrupt and explain perhaps this way. Pat, our top grading process involves asking a lot of questions about a lot of jobs, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd focus on the question asked. Or say something like, your running marathons really sounds fascinating, but I'm concerned we won't have time to complete this interview if we don't get back to discussing your career. Nice, but a little more pushy than option number one. And the third time, you might say something like, Joe, I'm wondering if you've read some books that say you have to take control of the interview. Please don't, because I'm thinking that if you come to work for me, I'll have difficulty getting you to answer my questions. Now, the gentle approach is almost always sufficient to regain control. If you're the hiring manager, can you imagine what it would be like working with a subordinate who would routinely try to avoid your questions or obfuscate or flat out change your agenda in a conversation? The third, rather blunt approach is taken when you're about to reject the candidate and call off the interview. But this is very fair. This is fair to the interviewee to be that blunt if necessary, because it gives the candidate one last chance to pass the interview. I personally do this in interviews, essentially speaking for my client. I might say something like, Susan, we've been together for a couple of hours, and I found that sometimes I have to ask a question twice or even three times before I get an answer. I know you want to put your best foot forward, but I'm thinking that if Jan's the hiring manager, if Jan hires you, she would be frustrated because I know her, and I know that she really insists that people on her team listen carefully to her questions and answer them directly. Blunt? Yes. Fair? Yes. If interviewees under those circumstances permit you to retake control and answer your questions directly, great. But if you continue to have to re-ask questions, you're bound to reject a candidate, and that's also great because you've probably avoided a costly mishire. This one.